Welcome back to the Exploration Lab. Today we're putting the politics and persuasion of Machiavelli's The Prince under the rhetorical analysis microscope. This Renaissance text has been studied and debated for centuries because Machiavelli wasn't just writing philosophy. He was persuading rulers with his playbook of power. And that's got me thinking. When we listen to arguments, whether from leaders, the media, or even our friends, what makes them persuasive? Authors use facts and logic to make their arguments persuasive, but they also appeal to their audience's emotions and try to make their ideas sound credible and trustworthy. Which brings us to The Prince, a book in which the author does exactly that. So what was the rhetorical situation of this Renaissance text? Let's get some expert insight.
The Renaissance. A time of rather complicated politics. And among the many minds grappling with power, few caused as much stir as Niccolo Machiavelli.
So, he wrote The Prince in the early 1500s, but why did he write it?
Good question. His home in Florence, Italy was not the grand republic it had once been. The powerful Medici family had taken control. And Machiavelli, once a key political figure, was banished from public life, left to twiddle his thumbs in exile.
So he wrote The Prince as a way to get back into power.
Precisely. A strategic gift of sorts, dedicated to Prince Medici himself. It was a guide filled with advice on how rulers can gain and maintain control.
And wasn't it super controversial?
Indeed. Some saw it as a harsh but practical guide for governing, but others saw it as the dangerous and manipulative work of a madman. And that debate still rages on today. But what is clear is that Machiavelli was crafting an argument designed to persuade.
That's exactly what we'll be exploring today. Our mission? To analyze how Machiavelli's appeals to logic, credibility, and emotion impact his audience. And we'll evaluate the fallacies within those appeals so you can decide how persuasive they really are. It's time to fire up the rhetorical analysis microscope, grab your guided notes, and get started on today's language experiment. Under the microscope today, one of the most debated and polarizing passages from The Prince. We'll analyze how Machiavelli builds his argument about leadership. Let's read to find out exactly what his argument is and consider the logic behind it. From this arises the question whether it is better to be loved more than feared or feared more than loved. The reply is that it is much safer to be feared than loved. Whoa, so he's saying that leaders are better off if they're feared rather than loved. This is the argument he's making in the passage. And he presents this as though there are only two options. How do you think it impacts an audience when a complex issue is narrowed down to only two choices? Pause the video to jot down some ideas. Having just two options makes an issue seem clear-cut and simple, no room for complexity or alternatives. Machiavelli is appealing to the audience's logic, or logos. He's trying to make his idea sound rational and straightforward, and the way he's chosen to do that is by presenting the audience with a binary choice, just two options to consider. But let's step back for a moment. Does leadership really come down to just these two options? Is that truly logical? What leadership qualities do you think he left out of this choice? Pause the video to make some notes. I'm thinking that a ruler could have qualities like fairness, diplomacy, wisdom, or genuine care for the people. Lots of possibilities. The binary choice has created a logical fallacy, or a flaw in reasoning, called a false dilemma. And that's because there aren't really just two choices. The issue's much more complex. So while his argument sounds logical, it's actually limiting the discussion to only the options he wants the audience to consider. But persuasion isn't just about logic. It's also about who's making the argument and whether the audience trusts them. Let's keep reading to see how Machiavelli appeals to credibility, or ethos, in this passage. For it may be said of men in general that they are ungrateful. As long as you benefit them, they are entirely yours. They offer you their blood, their goods, their life, and their children. As I have before said, when the necessity is remote, but when it approaches, they revolt, and the prince who has relied solely on their words is ruined. Intense. Notice this line? His universal language makes it sound like an absolute truth, that all men are ungrateful and will betray their leaders. But let's think about this rhetorical choice. Why might presenting ideas as universal truths make an author seem credible or trustworthy? Pause the video to jot down some thoughts. Universal language makes the author seem like an expert who knows the truth about people. Machiavelli positioned himself as someone credible who could be trusted. But is there a logical fallacy at play here? Yep. He takes a limited observation about human nature and applies it to all people. That's called a hasty generalization. This oversimplifies reality, but it can be incredibly persuasive, especially if the audience doesn't stop to think about how the author's rhetorical choices are impacting them. You know what else is persuasive? Emotions. Authors intentionally appeal to pathos, or emotions, to influence their audience's thinking. Take another look at the passage. Remember, Machiavelli's trying to persuade politicians that leading through fear is the best option. So what language does he use to appeal to their emotions? And how might this impact whether they agree with his argument? Pause the video to make some notes. Machiavelli uses loaded language to get his point across. His words are packed with emotion and paint a dramatic picture. When times are good, people may offer their leaders their blood, possessions, even their own children. But when times get tough, they'll turn against their leaders and ruin them. And that's where fear comes in. A ruler seeking power and control would likely fear losing their authority. Machiavelli taps into that fear and uses it to push his audience toward one conclusion. Ruling through fear is the only way to maintain power. But this is another logical fallacy. Appeals to emotions like fear are persuasive, but sometimes they make the argument rely way more on emotion than logic. When an argument leans too much on emotion and not enough on logical reasoning, it becomes a fallacy, or flaw, in that reasoning. And this is where your reasoning comes in. Now it's time to use some logic of your own to think about Machiavelli's argument and evaluate whether his methods of persuasion are effective. Do you think he builds enough credibility so you can trust what he has to say about leadership? Does he rely too much on emotion, or does the logic of his argument hold up? There's no right or wrong answer. Only you can decide how his language impacts your thinking. So imagine that you are a new ruler of one of the most powerful countries in the world. Do you find Machiavelli's argument, that it's better for leaders to be feared rather than loved, to be effectively persuasive? Do his rhetorical choices strengthen or weaken his argument? Pause the video to record your thoughts. Authors make intentional rhetorical choices to shape their audience's thinking, and with our rhetorical analysis lens, we can examine those choices critically. In just one short passage, we've seen how Machiavelli's appeals to logos present a false dilemma. His appeals to ethos rely on a hasty generalization, and his appeals to pathos play into that fear. As you keep reading, watch for the effects of his language. Notice the appeals, devices, and fallacies creating those effects, and evaluate how persuasive his argument really is. Remember, behind every text is an author with a purpose that you can uncover through the lens of rhetorical analysis.
Hey, hey.